All right, welcome. You know the moment. You're standing in the middle of the grocery store, staring at two apples. They look pretty much identical. One has a standard sticker, the other has that green USDA organic seal, and a price tag that's about 50% higher. That exact moment is the front line of the very question we are tackling in this video. The whole debate between organic and conventional food, well, it's a minefield. It's absolutely packed with passionate arguments, deeply held beliefs, a ton of confusing health claims, and frankly, some very, very clever marketing. But if we strip all of that noise away, what does the science actually say? Today, we are going to cut right through it. We're setting aside perception, we're ignoring the marketing spin, and we're diving deep into the peer reviewed studies, the big meta analyses, and the comprehensive reviews to build a clear, evidence based picture of the real, tangible differences. This isn't about opinion, it's about data. Let's get into it. So here's our game plan for this deep dive. We'll start by defining what organic even means. What's the promise behind that label? Then, we're going to tackle the three big claims people care about most. Does it taste better? Is it more nutritious? And is it actually healthier? From there, we'll zoom out and look at the environmental footprint of each system. And I promise you, that picture is way more complicated and surprising than you might think. After that, we'll get practical and look at cost and accessibility before finally pulling all this evidence together to help you make a truly informed choice, not based on hype, but on solid facts. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide. Okay, first things first. Before we can even begin to compare these two totally different ways of growing our food, we have to be on the same page. What are we really talking about when we see that USDA organic seal? It's so important to understand that this isn't just some vague feel-good marketing term like all natural. No, it is a legally defined, government-regulated, and strictly enforced system of production with a huge set of rules that cover everything from the dirt in the ground to the product on the shelf. At its very core, organic farming is a philosophy put into practice. It's a system designed to work with nature, not to overpower it. The whole idea is built on principles of ecological balance and conserving biodiversity. Now, in the real world, this means farmers who want that seal on their stuff are flat out prohibited from using a whole toolbox of things that are standard in conventional agriculture. The big ones, most synthetic pesticides and man-made fertilizers. It also means absolutely no genetic engineering, no GMOs, and no using irradiation to kill germs and make food last longer. And the rules for animals are just as strict. They have to eat 100% organic feed, they can't be given growth hormones or routine antibiotics just to bulk them up, and they have to have access to the outdoors. It is a comprehensive farm-to-fork standard for the entire process. So with such a strict system in place, why are millions of people willing to shell out more money for this label, day in and day out? Well, the reasons are powerful and crystal clear. A major consumer study laid it all out. A huge majority, a staggering 72% of consumers choose organic because they believe it is fundamentally healthier for them. Just over half are driven by the belief that it's better for the environment. And another 28% are just convinced it tastes better. And beneath all of these beliefs are two big specific worries: a strong desire to lower their personal exposure to pesticides and a genuine concern for how farm animals are treated. These are the core promises that have built a multi-billion-dollar global industry. But the critical question, the whole reason we're here today, is this: does the science actually back up these beliefs? Let's start with the most personal one, the most subjective, yet one of the most common reasons you'll hear: taste. That 28% of consumers who believe organic food just tastes better, they're part of a really widespread public perception. I mean, we've all heard someone say it, maybe we've even said it ourselves, that an organic strawberry just tastes more like a real strawberry, right? But what happens when we step out of personal stories and into the cold, hard world of controlled scientific blind taste testing? Does that belief actually hold up? This seems like such a simple question, but trying to measure something as subjective as taste is incredibly difficult. For the results to mean anything, scientists have to design these studies with insane precision. They have to control for everything that could possibly change the flavor: the exact variety of the plant, the weather during that specific growing season, the quality of the soil, and most importantly, how ripe the food is at the very moment it's tasted. They even have to account for the psychological power of you knowing something is organic. It's a huge undertaking. So, after all that effort, what's the verdict? And here it is. This slide shows a clear and undeniable disconnect. On one side, you have that powerful, widespread belief. On the other side, you have the data from decades of controlled sensory studies, and that data is remarkably consistent. The vast majority of studies find no statistically significant difference in what scientists call sure. Some research suggests that certain organic fruits might, in some cases, have a slightly more intense flavor. But the reason isn't some kind of organic magic, it's just basic chemistry. Organic produce can sometimes have a little less water in it, meaning it's a bit drier. This concentrates the natural sugars and flavor compounds that are already there, which makes the taste more potent. But maybe the most surprising finding came out of a 2007 Kansas State University study. In a direct side-by-side test, people rated the conventional tomatoes as having a stronger flavor. But, and this is the absolute key, they also rated them as being a little bit more ripe. When the scientists crunched the numbers, they found that ripeness was the real driver of flavor intensity. The conclusion was unavoidable. The difference in taste was because of ripeness, not the farming method. This quote really just sums it all up perfectly. It's the conclusion from that major 2007 study I just mentioned. After meticulously growing and testing lettuce, spinach, tomatoes, and more right next to each other to control for as many variables as they possibly could, the verdict was clear. While our brains might think there's a difference, and while of course individual pieces of fruit will always vary in quality, the body of scientific evidence just doesn't support the idea of a systematic, consistent taste advantage for organic food. Okay, so if taste isn't the deciding factor, let's move on to the real heavyweight in this entire debate, nutrition and health. This is where the claims get serious, where the science becomes incredibly complex, and honestly, sometimes it seems downright contradictory. And this is the main reason, remember that 72% number, that people go organic. They believe it is fundamentally better for them and their families. So let's unpack that belief and see what the large-scale scientific reviews have actually found. This slide gets right to the heart of why we're all so confused about this topic. It puts two landmark scientific reviews side by side, and you can immediately see what looks like a conflict. On the left, we've got a huge 2017 review involving Harvard researchers. It sifted through hundreds of studies and concluded that for most common vitamins and minerals, vitamin C, iron, calcium, the differences are minimal if they exist at all. But it did find two interesting exceptions. Organic produce tends to have slightly higher levels of antioxidants called phenolic compounds, and it found a big difference in meat and dairy. Then on the right, you have a massive 2009 review from the very prestigious American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It looked at 50 years of data, and its conclusion was much more blunt. There is, quote, no evidence of a difference in nutrient quality. So, how can both be right? How do we make sense of this? The key, as it so often is in science, is in the details. Okay, let's zoom in on the biggest, most consistent, and most heavily marketed nutritional claim out there. It comes from that Harvard review and was also backed up by another huge study from Newcastle University. Both of these massive analyses found that organic milk and meat contain, on average, about 50% more beneficial omega-3 fatty acids. Now, 50% is a huge number. That's the kind of statistic that makes for amazing headlines, and it's often held up as a major health benefit. And the reason for it is pretty straightforward. Organic animals are required to have access to pasture and eat grass, which naturally boosts the omega-3 content in their milk and meat. But here is the absolutely crucial piece of context that almost always gets left out of the headlines. This is a direct quote from the very same Harvard review that reported the 50% figure. The authors themselves, in their own paper, explicitly state that this difference is likely of marginal nutritional significance. But why? How can a 50% increase be marginal? Well, it's because while the percentage increase is big, the total amount of omega-3s we're talking about is small to begin with. Meat and dairy just aren't the main sources of omega-3s in our diets. To put it into perspective, you would get way more omega-3s from a single serving of salmon than you would from switching your entire dairy intake to organic for a whole week. So while the 50% difference is real and scientifically documented, its actual impact on your overall health is probably very small. So this is the key point. The health debate has to go way beyond just vitamins and minerals. And when we look at the bigger picture of health, the arguments for organic get a lot stronger. First, this one is undisputed. Choosing organic significantly lowers your exposure to synthetic pesticide residues. Now, while conventional produce sold in the US is regulated to stay within limits the EPA considers safe, a lot of people, especially parents, would just rather minimize that exposure altogether. Second, and this is a huge global public health problem, conventional animal farming is a major driver of antibiotic resistance because of the routine use of antibiotics in feed. Organic standards clamp down hard on this practice, which helps preserve these life-saving medicines for humans. Third, there's growing evidence that organic cereals may contain less cadmium, a toxic heavy metal that gets into the food system through the mineral fertilizers that are banned in organic farming. But we also have to be honest about a major challenge for scientists. People who regularly buy organic food tend to live healthier lives in general. they exercise more, smoke less, and eat more fruits and veggies overall. This is called a confounding factor, and it makes it incredibly hard to prove that any health benefits are because of the organic food itself and not just the healthy lifestyle that goes with it. So, as we wrap up this section on health, it's clear the picture is incredibly nuanced. When it comes to the classic nutrients, vitamins, minerals, there aren't any huge game changing differences. But when you look at exposures, what you're not getting, there are big differences in your exposure to synthetic pesticides and in the contribution to antibiotic resistance. Practices like the ones you see here, encouraging pollinators, creating a balanced ecosystem, they're at the very heart of the organic philosophy, which really sees human health as being permanently linked to the health of the environment. And that provides a perfect transition to our next and maybe most complex section. We're about halfway through, and if you're finding this valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide. One of the absolute core principles of the organic movement is environmental stewardship. The belief is that by ditching synthetic chemicals and working with nature, organic farming is just inherently better for the planet. And you know what? In many important ways, it is. But when scientists conduct those systematic, cradle to grave life cycle analyses, the picture gets much, much more complicated. The answer to the question, which one is better for the environment, really boils down to one single critical question. How are you measuring it? This slide right here presents the single most important idea for understanding the entire environmental debate. This is the whole ballgame. A major 2012 analysis of hundreds of farms found that if you measure environmental impact per acre of land, organic farming almost always wins, and it's not even close. It builds healthier soil, it helps soil hold water, it leaks far fewer nutrients into rivers, and it supports way more biodiversity. But if you change your yardstick, if you instead measure the impact per pound of food, the entire story flips upside down. And the main reason for this is something called the yield gap. Conventional farming, with its powerful tools like synthetic fertilizers, generally produces a lot more food per acre. This means to get that same exact pound of wheat, organic farming simply requires more land. And on a planet with a growing population and a limited amount of farmable land, that is a huge, huge factor. Let's just visualize that land use problem, because this graph shows the sheer scale of the challenge. According to that same big analysis, to produce the exact same amount of food, organic farming requires, on average, a staggering 84% more land. Just think about that for a second. That is the opportunity cost of the organic system. If we converted all the world's agriculture to organic tomorrow, that 84% of extra land has to come from somewhere, and it would probably come from chopping down forests and plowing up grasslands, which would cause its own massive environmental problems, including a huge release of carbon. This land use efficiency is the single biggest environmental argument for intensive conventional farming. But it is definitely not a one-sided story. When it comes to energy use, organic has a clear and significant advantage. The industrial production of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer is an incredibly energy-hungry process. It uses a ton of natural gas. Since organic farming completely forbids its use, relying instead on things like compost and crop rotation, its overall energy requirement per pound of food produced is way lower. This is a major, undeniable environmental win for the organic system. So what about the big one? Greenhouse gases. You might think that lower energy use would automatically mean lower emissions, but the data here is surprisingly mixed, and it really depends on the specific food. This chart shows that complexity perfectly. Per kilogram, organic cereals and pork actually had slightly higher greenhouse gas emissions. This is partly because of the lower yields we talked about. Organic milk, on the other hand, was slightly lower. So there is no simple sweeping statement we can make. It is not as easy as organic is better or conventional is better. It truly varies from one product to the next. But let's end this environmental section on what is probably organic farming's most celebrated and well-documented benefit: biodiversity. Another huge meta-analysis looked at studies from all over the world and found that, on average, organic farms support 30% higher species richness. This means more types of native plants, more species of insects and pollinators like bees, more birds, and more beneficial critters living in the soil. By avoiding those broad-spectrum synthetic pesticides that can kill indiscriminately, organic farms create a much more welcoming and complex home for wildlife, which is a crucial and powerful benefit for the health of the entire ecosystem. All right, we've looked at the science of taste, the nuances of health, and the complex environmental trade-offs. But for most of us, there's another major factor that sways our decisions every single time we're in that grocery aisle: the price. The word organic is often basically synonymous with expensive, and there are real, structural reasons why. It's time to break down the economics of our food. So how much more are we really talking about? Well, while prices can bounce around with seasons and supply chains, study after study shows that organic products typically cost anywhere from 10 to 50% more than their conventional twins. And in some cases, for stuff like berries or highly processed organic snacks, that premium can be even higher. This price difference isn't just a small thing, it's a real factor that affects the weekly budget for a lot of families. Now, this higher price tag isn't just random. It directly reflects the real costs of production that we've been talking about. Like we saw in the environmental section, lower yields mean a farmer just gets less food from the same amount of land, so they have to charge more for it. Organic farming is also way more labor intensive. Things like pulling weeds have to be done with machines or even by hand instead of with a quick spray of herbicide. Farmers also have to pay for a costly certification process every single year to prove they're following the rules. And finally, higher animal welfare standards, like providing more space and mandatory outdoor access for animals, also add to the final cost. All of those factors from the farm ultimately get passed on to us at the checkout counter. And this price difference has a direct and pretty profound impact on who can even access this food. This chart, which is based on data from a study by Illinois Tech, shows just how big that cost barrier can be. Researchers surveyed shoppers in low income neighborhoods and found that only about 17% said they regularly bought organic fruits and vegetables. The vast majority said they just couldn't afford the premium, even if they personally thought organic was healthier for their families. This really highlights a critical and uncomfortable tension in our food system. The very people who might benefit most from diets packed with fresh produce are the ones who face the biggest economic hurdles to getting into the organic market. We have covered a ton of ground here. We've looked at the science of taste, the deep nuances of nutrition, the complex and often surprising environmental trade offs, and the real world economics of price. So, the goal now is not to declare a simple winner. The organic versus conventional debate isn't a football game where one side wins. The real goal is to put all of this complex information together so that you can make a choice that actually lines up with your own priorities, your budget, and your personal values. This summary table really brings it all together in one place. Let's just walk through it one last time. For taste, the science is clear, no significant difference. For nutrition, again, the differences are minimal for most vitamins and minerals. But for health safety, there are clear wins for organic, with much lower pesticide residue and way less antibiotic use. When we look at the environment, it's a story of trade offs. Organic is better when you measure it per acre, more biodiversity, healthier soil. But conventional is far more efficient, using much less land. And finally, for cost, the reality is undeniable. Conventional food is more affordable and therefore more accessible to more people. And this brings us to what is probably the single most important takeaway from this entire video. It's a conclusion that's echoed by pretty much every major health organization out there. The single biggest, most impactful thing you can do for your health is not about choosing an organic apple over a conventional one. It is about eating more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, period. A diet that is rich in conventional produce is so much better than a diet that is low in produce altogether. The proven benefits of the vitamins, the minerals, and the fiber in these foods far outweigh the potential and often theoretical risks from trace amounts of pesticides. I hope this video has helped you navigate this complex topic. If it has, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember to check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide. So we end right back where we began, standing in that grocery store aisle. But now you are armed with the evidence. The choice is not about which apple is universally better, because that apple doesn't exist. The choice is about which set of trade-offs you prioritize. Is your main concern minimizing your family's exposure to pesticides and fighting antibiotic resistance? Or is your top priority affordability and the incredible land use efficiency we need to feed a growing planet? There is no single right answer for everyone. The only question is, based on the science we've explored today, what matters most to you?